Alec Bohm has been one of the more controversial members of these Phillies teams throughout the past few seasons. But is there an upgrade out there on the open market that is worth paying the premium price of finding a new third baseman? Is Alex Bregman the difference making addition that this Phillies team could use, or is the organization better off served running it back with Alec Bohm once again? I do want to highlight the latest reports that are coming out linking the Sixers to Bregman directly here. These have been conversations that we've sort of heard behind the scenes for several months to this point, and even dating back to last offseason, a couple of whispers here. It was at this point last offseason where it felt like there was a far more focused pitchfork ready to chase Alec Bohm out of town than is the case this year. But does that mean that those were just some frustrated feelings at the time, or is now the time to capitalize when the market is a little higher? Let's dive into exactly what is going down within the margins of the MLB and talk through the future of Alec Bohm. And I do want to start off with this report that says, source, Alex Bregman plans to opt out of Red Sox contract. This coming from ESPN here, which writes up, Alex Bregman plans to opt out of his contract with the Boston Celtics, a source told ESPN on Tuesday night, confirming a New York Post report. This move was expected and doesn't rule out the veteran third baseman returning to Boston, but for now, he will be part of a free agent class for a second straight offseason. Last offseason, Bregman didn't find a home until the start of spring training when he agreed to a 3-year, $120 million deal with the Red Sox in mid-February that included opt-outs after 25 and 26. So this being the report that he is available, and then our good friends over at The Good Fight kind of proposed the theory of connecting him with the Philadelphia Phillies. So what it writes is, in case you weren't aware, it was reported earlier this week that the Red Sox third baseman Alex Bregman would indeed be opting out of the remaining 2 years on his contract with Boston and will enter free agency. It was not really an unexpected move, as Bregman sat around all of last offseason looking for a new home after leaving the Houston Astros in free agency. Boston eventually became that new home in mid-February when Bregman agreed to the 3-year, $120 million deal that included 2 opt-outs. Bregman had difficulty on the market last year as a 30-year-old coming off a subpar offensive 2024 where he hit .260 with 26 home runs, but had a career-low .768 OPS and a career-worst OBP at .315 since his rookie year. But Bregman should have a more robust market in 2025 as he rebounded in Boston to post a .821 OPS, his best since he had an .820 in 2022 and hit .273, his best average since 2021. His .360 OBP, or on-base percentage, would have ranked him among the top 20 in baseball if he had enough plate appearance to qualify. The now 31-year-old played in 114 games in 2025 due to his late start and a quad injury that sidelined him for close to a month. Nevertheless, he still managed to accumulate a 3.5 WAR and made his third All-Star game and first since 2019. So to kind of cut through the fluff of this is the baseline here is Alex Bregman is a guy who took a 1-year deal essentially, and it was a 3-year deal with opt-outs to basically rebuild his market. That he outperformed what was the production level of the season prior, and now the dollar figure is expected to gain. Are the Phillies in a spot to pay that type of premium is more of the conversation here. Now, to get into the Alex Bregman conversation, it mentioned that he did miss games, that he suited up for 114 last year, but he only hit 18 home runs and 62 RBIs. I understand a .360 on-base percentage. I understand he had 118 hits across his 403 at-bats, that he posted a .462 slugging percentage, and I understand who Alex Bregman is, or who he has been throughout the duration of his career. And to give an acknowledgement to those full stats for what we're looking at, this is a guy who's led the entire major leagues in WAR back in 2019 with 8.9. This is a guy who's led the league in stolen bases, who has hit for legitimate power, who's posted 40-plus home runs in a season, who's had triple-digit RBIs in 2 different seasons of his career. But this is also a guy who's now about to turn 32. And does he still have that level of pop in him? Now, when looking at sort of the power numbers of the slugging here, there has not been this significant drop-off, but he certainly is not going to be slugging a .592, as was the case when he is in his prime. He's coming off a season where he hit .463, .453 the year prior, .441 the year before that. That is a little bit too similar to Alec Bohm for my liking here. Now, to have the Bohm conversation, that is directly the frustration. And in fact, I do want to give him a little bit of a tip of the hat, that I think this was the best season of Alec Bohm's career, particularly the defensive side of the ball and his ability to play third base. We're at a level where I thought Alec Bohm could never reach, that I thought for the duration of his career, we're going to look at this guy as a bit of a defensive, weak spot in this Phillies team, but that is no longer the case. He is one of the better third basemen in all of baseball. He uses his frame, uses his 6'5" frame, has a strong enough arm, has delivered in some big moments here. Unfortunately, that progress has not exactly translated to the offensive side of the ball and him actually physically at the dish here. Now, to give Bohm stats overall, the raw numbers do not make you jump off here. We're talking about 11 home runs, 59 RBIs, a 331 on base percentage, had 464 at bats on the season, registered 133 hits on those, posted a slugging of 409. He's still 29 years old, so that not that notably younger than Alex Bregman. We're talking about 2-3 years here, and it is the lack of power that I continue to be frustrated by Alec Bohm. Now, I think with the right lineup combinations, you can ultimately overcome that. I just don't think that is the case for the Phillies currently. We're talking about this guy's bat cleanup for a significant portion time of his Phillies tenure here. And I understand that the slant of that from Rob Thomson directly is the right and left-handed pairings, that he's been so committed to that. And that's sort of a widespread Rob Thomson critique that I do have, is I think sometimes we get lost in the plot of trying to get this tactical advantage that you overthink just playing your best players at the spot that they're at. I'm not afraid to have a left-hander come into the game to pitch back-to-back to Bryce Harper and Kyle Schwarber. I'm just not. That's something that I understand trying to avoid that, but these are guys that mash lefties in the same way that they mash righties, and I don't think we should be talking about things or staging our lineup in a way to prevent things that I do not view as problems. That is not the Rob Thomson theory, and he would push back and say any specific advantage that you can gain is something we're going to want to take advantage of. You can go through the whole process here. We can talk ourselves in circles. The point being, the result of this is Alec Bohm has batted cleanup for this Phillies team for an extended period of time now. And that to me is kind of unacceptable. Now, that does not necessarily mean that Alec Bohm can't be in the lineup. I don't think he can be the 4-hole hitter pretty much ever again here. Now, to continue on with this article a little bit and give a little bit more context to the situation, that it writes about Bregman, saying, Bregman's strong defense and patient approach to the plate, as well as his right-handed bat, would be a nice fit for the middle of the Phillies order, and he comes with a championship pedigree. The problem, of course, is that the Phillies have Alec Bohm currently occupying third base and Aiden Miller in the wings behind him. Acquiring Bregman would necessitate finding a trade partner for Bohm. As far as how Miller plays into the equation, Bregman also has some experience at shortstop and second base, although he hasn't played shortstop since 2019, and he hasn't played second base since 2018. Moving him away from third would likely lessen some of the defensive value and will require another move of either trading Bryson Stott or moving Trey Turner off of shortstop to make room for either Bregman or Miller. That doesn't take into account the contract that Bregman could look to sign. It was rumored last offseason that he was looking for a 6 or 7 year deal worth over $200 million. It remains to be seen if he will have a similar asking price this winter after his experience last year despite his bounce back performance on the field. Bregman will turn 32 on March 30th, meaning that any team that signs him will be taking on most of his late 30s. The Phillies already have a fair share of money locked into aging players, and that's before making decisions on Kyle Schwarber and JT Realmuto, who will be 33 and 35 in 2026. Would Philadelphia want to hand out another long-term deal for possibly the downside of Bregman's career? Could they? Our own John Stolnis broke down the immediate and long-term payroll commitments already for the Phillies. Now, before I dive into the actual payroll situation, Aiden Miller is a factor that I have not touched on yet. It was interesting to me to hear Dave Dombrowski say in these postseason press conference that when Aiden Miller is coming up, he's coming up to be an everyday player. And that has been the exact same stance with Justin Crawford, that he stood here midseason, Dave Dombrowski that is, and talked about we don't have a direct role for Justin Crawford right now, so we're not going to call him up. That we're going to continue rolling with Max Kepler, with Harrison Bader, with Nick Castellanos, with Brandon Marsh. That is our outfield for the time being. I get it. I understand where you're coming from, and I think a lot of this has to do with the contracts down the line of keeping him arbitration eligible and making sure he's under team control for as much as possible, that in the eyes of the Phillies organization, it is not worth getting whatever level of production would be the case if you pulled him up to sacrifice another season of potential team control. I kind of have mixed feelings about that because I do think guys need to get seasoned to an extent. And I do think it is not the case for every single player that you call them up to the major leagues and they're ready to be an everyday starter. I don't think that's going to be the case with Justin Crawford, even if that is the angle that the Phillies organization is going to take. There's going to be growing pains with him. He is a young player who is yet to face major league pitching. That is not the easiest job in the world. Now, obviously, that is not the case with Alex Bregman. This is a guy who's seen it all, done it all on the biggest stage with the brightest lights on him right here. But that is a pretty penny to change or to pay up here to basically have to take on some additional problems. They're going to have that conversation with Alec Bohm. The only way that I see this working is if you can potentially trade Alec Bohm for a legitimate piece. I'm not talking, getting off money or things like that. I'm talking bringing back a legitimate player, whether that is a power hitting outfielder, one of the corner spots that can lock down and be an everyday player. That's something that could make some sense to me, but I just feel like this creates more problems than it ultimately solves for this Phillies team. Is the difference between Alex Bregman and Alec Bohm as notable as what those $1 million will look like? And to give the full context of what this Phillies sort of salary cap outlook is, that I did want to pull up this portion here, which writes, according to Spot Track, the Phillies already have the sixth largest payroll commitment for next season at $170.2 million of its for these 8 players already under contract. Zack Wheeler, Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, Aaron Nola, Nick Castellanos, Taijuan Walker, Matt Strahm, and Christopher Sanchez. Jesus Luzardo, Alec Bohm, Johan Duran, Edmundo Sosa, Bryson Stott, and Brandon Marsh all have arbitration figures that will land between $5 and $12 million each. So when you factor in all these players who are in arbitration or pre-arbitration, the opening day estimated luxury tax payroll stands at $250 million. Last offseason, it was expected the Phillies would make a run at some big-name free agents, most notably Juan Soto. It never came close to happening, as it became clear that the front office didn't want to go too far beyond the third luxury tax threshold. The signings of Max Kepler and Jordan Romano to one-year deals didn't work out. The trade for Luzardo certainly did. By the end of the season, the Phillies' 2025 luxury tax payroll was $313 million, the fourth highest in baseball. One would expect that the 26 payroll to be close to this season. If that's the case, the Phillies have roughly $60 to $70 million to spend. While they likely will move on from Castellanos in some fashion, they may not be able to shed much of his salary in doing so. Same with Walker. This all points to me, they have to be really cautious with the spending. I would not view signing Alex Bregman to a $200 million contract as a cautious decision. The first order of business is to figure out, are you sticking with Kyle Schwarber? Is JT Realmuto back? And I do think the answer should be yes to both those in a probable sense. But this is not a blank check conversation anymore. This is we have to tactically build out this organization and do what is best for the Philadelphia Phillies. That does not mean you can get whatever you guys want. You have not earned that in a postseason setting. And I'm talking to Kyle Schwarber directly here. It was an incredible season. I also think that's probably the best we ever see Kyle Schwarber play, and we have to enter that conversation as such. So there's a lot of complications to this. I've seen Alex Bregman pop up as a huge storyline or a potential name to add to this Phillies team. I just have a hard time seeing the pathway to this fixing their problems without a ridiculous trade offer popping on the horizon. I do want to make it clear, the asking price that they were seemingly giving around for Alec Bohm last year was pretty outrageous. That even with Dave Dombrowski, I understand the art of negotiation of you start high, that you're going to make sure you can meet in the middle a little bit there. It felt like he was shooting for the stars and having no chance of landing on the clouds there. So we'll see if there's a different tune this offseason. Maybe it was the feeling of we really don't want to trade this guy, so you're going to have to really back up the Brinks truck. But the bottom line is he returned, he played just fine, and he has sort of proven himself. That I think the Alex Bohm sort of stock price has settled a bit. It is not as erratic as felt like the case for these past 2 seasons. I feel like we have a clear idea of who he is as a baseball player, and I do think there's a world where that is a functional player that equates to winning if the right lineup is surrounding him. So we'll see what ultimately happens from here, but we'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments. Do you think Alex Bregman could be the difference maker for this Phillies team? Drop those thoughts below, and as always, do want to remind you guys to make sure you are hitting that subscribe button. At this point in time, 81.7% of you guys have not subscribed to us here at Phillies Digest just yet. I know we're in the heat of the offseason. We got plenty more to get into. Make sure you're hitting that subscribe button. Drop a like on this video. I'll be back talking with you next time. Peace.